But I now want to move on to some calculator basics. For me, understanding and getting to know your calculator is absolutely fundamental. I've seen from people attending my workshops that many people are opening up their calculators for the first time and thinking that it's just something that you tap away at and get to know as easily as riding a bicycle. But in fact, there are many advantages to really getting totally familiar with the use of your calculator. And here are some little tips that I think are useful. For those of you who haven't bought your calculators, tomorrow is the day that you should go out and buy it. The sooner you can get familiar with it, the better. I don't know how many of you are aware of what calculators you need to have for the CFA exam, but only 2 of them are recognized, and you can't go into the hall with anything other than either the Texas VA2 Plus, which also has a professional version, which is not shown here, or the HP12C. Both are very good calculators. I've worked with both of them quite intensively. I like them both. It's really up to one's personal preferences as to which one goes for. I think I'm finding that most people are preferring the Texas instrument. It's a very powerful instrument, but you must get to know how to use it well, because you can make just as many mistakes as with any other calculator, and garbage in then becomes garbage out. So maybe we can just have a little show of hands. How many people already have their calculators and have chosen the Texas instrument? Clyde, what are the numbers?
So Peter, we've got about, I'd say about 50% of the people have put their hands up, maybe a little more than 50% that they've bought their calculators and they've got a Texas Instruments one.
Texas. And have any people chosen the HP12C?
Anyone who's got the HP12C, would you like to put your hands up? Yeah, we got a few people who have bought those already. I guess maybe 30% of the people have got the HP12C, and I think maybe the rest haven't got their calculators yet.
Okay. All right, once you bought your calculator, there's a manual that comes with it, and sorry to be flippant about it, but many people end up not reading the manual and asking some very straightforward questions that would very easily be resolved if they had taken the time to read the manual. So when you're sitting at the airport waiting for an airplane, if you've got a little bit of extra time here and there, just make sure that you work through that manual and focus on some of the little tips that come through from reading the manual. I'm going to take you through what I regard as some of the keys and functions that you need to be familiar with. But it's not a bad idea to set yourself the objective of going right through the manual at least once. And then try and practice as much as possible outside just preparing for CFA. Now, if it's possible to have the calculator on your desk, do a couple of simple calculations on personal finance, compound interest, all these sorts of things, and make sure that you are as familiar with your calculator as you are with your iPhone, your BlackBerry, your computer, your laptop. It's a question of getting to know the shortcuts as well. So the faster one can do calculations, the more time you save, and the more confident you are when you get into the exam itself. So calculator exercises are an absolute must as an integral part of your preparation.
Peter,
right.
Perhaps I could just interrupt you here. We've just got a question asking if one of our people are using a HP10B2, and they're asking if this is allowed. I'm not 100% sure.
Thanks. Yeah, no, thank you for that question. Unfortunately, it's not. When I started, one was allowed to use the HP10B, but at some stage in the last couple of years, they've discontinued allowing that, and I've been very upset about that. I've actually written to the CFA Institute and said, for heaven's sake, it's a very commonly used calculator, and why is it not able to be used? And they've come back and said, unfortunately, the blanket rule is that we just go for either the Texas or the 12C. So the HP10B works quite similarly to the Texas instrument, but unfortunately it's not allowed in the exam room on the day. So you have to just bite the bullet and get one of the other two.
Okay, so David, hopefully you heard
Thanks
that.
for the question. Yeah, thanks for the question. Right, let's look at a couple of key buttons that are very useful to be familiar with on the calculator. The first one is the on and off button, and sorry to be flippant about it, but many people seem to try and clear their memories by pressing the calculator on and off. And when you get into panic mode, that's the first button that you try and use to sort of get rid of what you've got on the screen. Unfortunately, these calculators have got long memories, and if you switch it on, switch it off and switch it on again, the same information that you had there previously will still be sitting inside your calculator. Not necessarily on the screen, but in all the memory functions and things like that. So it doesn't actually help to use the on and off button to clear the calculator effectively. Clearing the screen is the next important thing, and if we can just focus on the Texas for the moment, down in the bottom left-hand corner you have the CE or C button. That one just by itself will be able to clear the screen. The next important function is to be able to clear out some of the memories, and this has to be done with a second function operation. So just above CE or C you have a little yellow instruction saying clear work, and that gets activated by pressing the second function key and then the CE key. So you're activating the instruction just above the button itself. And that clear work is used to clear things like data that you may have inputted in preparation for a statistical calculation. Now data goes into button number 7, and you can see it here. Oh, sorry, let me just go back. Data goes into button number 7, and so if you wanted to clear out that data, you would first go into the data function, so you would say second function 7, then you'll find the whole lot of X and Y data comes up, and then you would say second function clear work, and that'll clear out all the history that's in data. Another important area that you need to clear out in this way is the cash flow button. This is where you put all your irregular cash flows, and by pressing CF and then second function clear work, you're able to clear out all of the memories there. The other one that is used quite a lot is the time value of money clearing function, which you'll find there under the above the future value button. Time value of money relates to these 5, NI, PV, PMT, and FV, and if you want to clear out those and start another function or another calculation based on time value of money, then clearing is second function clear time value of money. Clearing out memories. I don't know how many of you use memories on your calculator, but all of these numbers 0 up to 9 of separate memory storages, and if you want to clear that, you would say second function memory and then second function clear work again. So my big message to you is, when you want to clear something, just stop for a moment and don't just switch it on and off again. It won't achieve the result. You must rather make sure that you clear out exactly what you need to, so that your calculator is clean for the next calculation, whether it's time value of money, cash flows, data, or whatever. For those who've got the HP calculator, the 3 key things that you need to just note are clearing the screen, which is a CLX button in the middle of the calculator, second row from the bottom. Then you want to also know how to clear out the financial functions, and that's a yellow function F and the XY button, which is just to the left of CLX. It has a little FIN above that. So that is clearing out all the financial registers. And if you want to clear the whole register, you can press F function CLX, which basically cleans out, almost all the calculations, or the previously stored calculations. So whether you're using the Texas or the HP, please, please, please make sure that you know with confidence how to clear all the various functions. These are the buttons that I think are the important ones that you need to have under your belt to prepare properly for CFA. There's quite a lot of work with time value of money buttons, which is those N, I, PV, PMT, and FV, and that's typically for uniform cash flows. So whenever your payment or your annuity is either zero, you might just, for example, be trying to calculate a future value from a present value, or a constant amount, repaying a loan, paying off a mortgage bond, saving a fixed amount each month. Whenever the PMT is constant, you can use those time value of money buttons. As soon as the payment is not constant, you need to resort to the CF function, cash flows. For example, you might be wanting to value an equity that's paying increasing dividends every year. So in that case, the PMT that you're going to be receiving will be changing, and you need to input a separate payment for each of the year's cash flows. And there you use the cash flow button. NPV and IRR are very important functions in finance, and they certainly come through in the CFA syllabus, and you must be familiar with those. On the Texas instrument, you can convert nominal to effective interest rates just by pressing the function. The iConv button is button number 2. Second function, button 2, will enable you to convert from nominal to effective. And e to the x is what you use for continuous compounding. So you've got that on both the Texas and the HP instruments. Just make sure you know how to use those as well. Data and stats typically relates to things like means and standard deviations, and both calculators can do very nice calculations so that you don't need to know all those formulas. If you can do it on the calculator, well, that's all you need to do to get the right answer in the exam. NPR and NCR, particularly in the Texas instrument, relates to permutations and combinations, which is part of the stats syllabus. And on the right-hand side of the calculator, second and third button from the bottom, you have got some nice simple functions to help you calculate permutations and combinations. Unfortunately, on the HP calculator, you haven't got a quick method. You have to apply the formulas. And then I would urge all of you to think of using the memory buttons. I'm going to say it again just now, but if you can avoid writing down any more than you need to, you'll find that you save time and you save accuracy. And particularly where there are fractions involved, the memory buttons can be a very useful way of storing and retrieving data. Any comments on your side, Clyde, as to what's helped you in your exam preparation as far as these things are concerned?
I think just pretty much what you've said. I remember when I attended your workshops, just the preparation and the practice especially with the calculator helped me tremendously. I've heard many times people pretty much blaming their failure of the CFA exams on the fact that they didn't have the right calculator or they didn't know how to use it. And countless people have told me how they just went with their regular university calculator and then found at the door that they weren't allowed to use it, and then had to try do all their calculations in their head and on pieces of paper. So spending your time with the calculator is the way to get through. And if you can do it efficiently on your calculator, it'll save you a lot of time and take a lot of pressure off you in the exam.
Great, thank you very much. Let's move on to a couple of very specific suggestions that I've got in terms of setting up your calculators. So if you've got your calculators there with you, let's go through a couple of these points. The first one is how many decimal places to show on your screen. And I would suggest that you use 4 decimal places for 2 reasons. The first one is that in the exam, many of the questions where there are fractions involved will ask you to find the answer that is closest to something. And that closeness is often represented in A, B, and C having answers up to 4 decimal places. So you'll recognize the answer with those 4 decimal places loaded onto your calculator. The second thing is that if you are, for example, doing percentage calculations and you get an answer of 0.1539, well, in your head you can know that that's 15.39% instead of having to multiply by 100. Whereas if you've only got it to 2 decimal places, you won't quite get that accuracy. So how do you program your calculator to 4 decimal places? Well, let's start with the HP calculator first. And those of you who have it in front of you, all you do is you press the F function, the yellow button, and then specify the number of decimal places that you want. So if you press F and 4, there you should find that it goes to 4 decimal places. Change it back to 2, F and 2, it goes back to 2 decimal places. For those of you who have the Texas Instrument, this is a second function, and it relates to format. Now, format is a word that you'll find right at the bottom of the calculator, just above the dot or the point. So let's try pressing second function, format, and it asks you for number of decimal places, and there you should specify 4. And then the trick on this calculator is to remember always that you have to enter that information, because the calculator needs to have some confirmation that that's what you want to do with it. So the enter button is in the top row, second from the left. So if you say 4 and enter, and then you've got to get out of there because you need to use the calculator for some other calculations. So you say second function and quit, which is the top left-hand button. And there you are. Your calculator should be programmed for 4 decimal places. Why don't you all just try changing it back to 2 and back to 4 again.
Maybe you guys can just put your hands up when you've completed the task. Okay, most of the people have done it, Peter. I think we can move on.
Good. Everybody okay on that? Thank you. Well done. Second strong suggestion of mine is that I often get people saying, oh, the calculator's giving me no solution, particularly when it relates to time value of money calculations. Now, in time value of money, you're typically dealing with investment decisions. And with any investment, you need to pay some money first in order to receive something back. Or if you've borrowed money for, let's say, a loan, a mortgage, or whatever, you receive the money first and then you pay it back. In other words, in all of the time value of money calculations, there's always a 1 plus or 1 minus sign. And the way I think about it is that if you are taking money out of your pocket to pay something, then it needs to go into the calculator as a negative number. If you're receiving money back into your pocket, it goes into the calculator as a positive number. And the button that helps you change something from positive to negative is the plus minus button on the Texas, which is in the bottom row, second from the left. And on the HP calculator, it's the CHS button, which is in the top row, more or less in the middle. Change sign. So that's a very important one to remember. And as soon as you see no solution, don't, like I said, turn the calculator off and start again. Just check what you've inputted, and I'm going to show you something called recall to do that little check. and you may find that you've forgotten to put in a plus or a minus. Third point is that the Texas calculator in particular needs to have some confirmation that what you've pressed is to be entered and stored. And I find that quite a few people make the mistake of putting in the numbers and then not pressing the enter button. So just make sure that you confirm using that enter button for many of the calculations. You'll pick it up as you go along and use it more and more, but it's a common mistake that people make. Another common mistake that people make on the Texas is to forget to press the compute button, particularly if you're doing NPV and IRR calculations. You need to get to that particular function and afterwards press compute. If you've done a previous calculation of NPV, let's say, the previous number will still be sitting there unless you've cleared it. And if you don't press the compute button, you may end up thinking that you've got a wrong answer. So remember that CPT compute button for finishing off quite a few of those types of calculations. And then I've mentioned this already, try to avoid just switching on and off. A very, very useful button that I find is totally underused by many people is the RCL button. Let's just find it on our calculators. There on the Texas, it's down in the left-hand corner, second from the bottom, and on the HP, it's in the bottom row, sort of in the middle. And if, for example, you come up with a no solution for time value of money, the clever thing to do is, instead of starting all over again, just press that recall button and then each of the inputs. So you could say, for example, recall N. Is it the number that I needed? Then recall I. Yes, that looks correct. Recall PV. Ah, I see that I haven't put the minus in. Press the plus minus, input it again into PV, and there we are. You've solved your problem very, very quickly without getting into a flap and stopping and starting again. So that RCL button is an invaluable one, and I suggest all of you become completely familiar with using it. Another nice little way to use it is that, let's say you're doing a time value of money calculation and you've put all your inputs in. Just before you press compute future value or compute PMT, just do a quick RCL to say, have I put everything in correctly? And then when you press the final button, you should get the correct answer.